Hello and welcome to a mini episode. Something a bit different, but very much part of the sort of thing I want to cover in the channel. A few days ago, it was my birthday, and I was, because I'm sad like this, I spent the latter part of the evening watching a speed run done for the charity, two speed runs done for the charity organisation. Awesome Games Done Quick. If you haven't looked at that, haven't watched any of them, see if you can watch some of the ones outside of lockdown where they're doing live events. They're really good, and I'll put a link in for the two ones that I watched. I think they were particularly exceptional. I watched the first one for Final Fantasy IX, and then I watched another one for Final Fantasy VII. And although watching the speedruns is not a good way to discover this game, or indeed any other game, it struck me watching and just remembering everything in it, just how good the storytelling, not necessarily the writing, but the storytelling in Final Fantasy VII is. So what I wanted to do is do a little session where I play through just the opening bombing mission, and I'll play through it in a sort of, not rushing it, but like, maybe not quite as if I'd be there for the very first time, but I'm not gonna sort of do any sort of special build or anything. I'm just gonna play the game, and I'm gonna turn the microphone off for this. It's gonna be we're playing it quietly, and then afterwards I'm gonna give a bit of a breakdown of like what's going on, and why I think this is fantastic and an absolute top tier RPG and piece of storytelling. So we'll just sort that. Yeah, it will be mic off in. I don't know. I'll see you in. We don't need the memory card. I guess I will see you again in about 15 minutes. I think this should probably take something like that. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that was the opening. In actual fact, I think it was about the opening 25 minutes of that, so slightly longer than I remembered, but fine. This is, of course, well, I say the original. It's the original European release of, because I am myself European and there are some slight differences across versions. The original European release of Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1. We're not dealing with souped up graphics or anything here. This has not been any sort of remaster or upscaling is perhaps a little unfair, but the messy upscaling of the PC version. If you're going to play the game, it is my advice that you don't get drawn in by upscaling and things, and don't play the PC port because it's got a number of problems with it. See if you can't get yourself a copy of the PlayStation 1 original. So hopefully, given my normal recording settings, that came through absolutely fine and played okay on YouTube. Now, I do apologise. There's going to be some quality loss as we sort of talk through it, because I've got to basically play back my own recording in VLC and then record that, and then process that as one file to add in the content as you may be seeing in front of you now if I put it in, and then another processing when it goes up to YouTube. So the second half of the video may not look as good as the first. But with that caveat said, I think that that opening, already in that opening, which is a fantastic opening, it's one of the best openings to any game. You can see already the foundations of the storytelling, that like devices that Final Fantasy VII uses right the way through its game. And this is why Final Fantasy VII, as I've sort of talked about in the past, is, I think, the most beloved game of all time. I think like the, I'm not saying it's the most popular game of all time, but the people, the amount of love it's generated is colossal, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So let's talk about like the context of the gaming world when this was released. Final Fantasy VII was one of the first flagship titles on the PlayStation 1, which, along with the Sega Saturn, was part of the first generation of 32-bit consoles. Consoles using CD-ROMs for data handling. So, to give you a sort of rough idea of the metrics that means in terms of the data size, a large SNES game might have been, I don't know, like maybe like 4 or 5 megabytes, whereas a CD in Final Fantasy VII came on 3 CDs. It holds, I think, about 676, if memory serves. It's a little harder to explain what the difference means jumping from 16-bit to 32-bit, but it's very much like what's the word? An exponential increase in power. It's not just twice as fast, if you want to call it that. It's more. So they've suddenly got a lot more power to play with than they would have had on previous games, which it to some extent. But by the way, let's just nod our hearts to Final Fantasy VI, which sadly didn't get a European release, but I have managed to play since. It didn't get a release at the time, I should say. That does absolutely marvellously with a fraction of the resources that were available. But the thing is with this, that like, even though this new leap in power had come forward, and even though it really opened doors for developers and development houses, it hadn't necessarily changed the business landscape. Like, if you look at how long, like, the turnaround time was for games then. I mean, if you think about, like, when Square Enix started, supposedly, like the Final Fantasy VII remakes are the first of those travesties. I think it was in development for something like about 14 years, Whereas I'd have to look up, and maybe I will between doing this, the actual development time for Final Fantasy VII, but I think you're more likely to be talking about months rather than years. I could be wrong on that. But the speed with which, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, and Final Fantasy IX they're all released in like a 5-year turnaround, if memory serves. So, they were absolutely rattling through these games. So that's a limitation. Obviously, by modern rendering standards, this is a PlayStation 1 game, and even with the time, they're simply not able to do the things that you could do on like a modern PC, PlayStation 5, what have you. So that's there. So you've got some restrictions. I'm just going to turn the mic down slightly because I think I'm booming a bit here. So that's part of the context of it. The other social context of the era is we're about to see with the PlayStation, and it was particularly the PlayStation that I think sort of pushed this. The birth of what I might rather cruelly like slap down on gender lines, but it felt like it was like that at the time. The birth of the man-child. I think in the 16-bit era, most people who played video games were children. They were, you look at the SNES and the Mega Drive, and indeed the NES and the Master System before them, were kind of aggressively marketed at children and not really at adults. They were toys. Children played with toys. And the PlayStation was the first console to try and go, well, actually, video games can be fun whatever your age. Let's try and market that to a slightly older audience. Which is not to say that Final Fantasy VII is targeted at adults, but rather that it's including adults, I think, in its target demographic. I don't mean that disparagingly. It's just a kind of a fact of the era that like PlayStation games, were shooting for an older audience, while also still having the previous market of younger kids, and particularly for Final Fantasy VII, for adolescents. So tonally, what you've got here is something that is still quite heavily Japanese in its style, theme, and writing. But it's being targeted at, I think the back of the box in the UK, if that's worth anything, as I said, what it was like unsuitable for under 12s. So that was where we're going. So with that context in mind, I think there's 3 devices that make the storytelling really good and really successful here, even when the writing can be, I mentioned in my other video and tier listing, Disco Elysium and Planescape Torment had the best writing in sections, but they don't have the best storytelling. This has better storytelling. And there are 3 foundations to that. The first foundation is short, punchy dialogue. The second one is genuine, integrated screenplay and cinematography with the game, with the gaming experience, right? Like not just isolated away from that. And the final one is, musical storytelling made possible by the quite brilliant Nobuo Uematsu, who, is a legend with this. I'm going to try and play the video back now, and I'll be pausing it along the way, and I'm just going to see if we can see what exactly it is that I mean by these things. So, is that going to work? Oh, you're good. You get a really handsome play thing on the side. So let's pause it there. That it's a 2-minute opening. That's cinematic. And again, bear in mind this is the first the first 32-bit new era of Final Fantasy. They buy themselves a little bit of time with the start to set up the grand thing that's coming. If we go back through and just come to this opening bit, is just, as I say, just kind of buying time. The Ares bit is when it starts to take off. And then what we're just going to do is just sort of 5-second shot by 5-second shot. We're going to just introduce higher levels of scale and scope. And this, if you did that in a video game, you do that in cinema, you do anything, that is a fantastic introduction to a place. Bang, there's your title. Fine. What I like next is the accompanying of the zoom in with the pace of the train, and just alongside this like scope, there is also a sense of urgency given by that. This is fantastic, and I wish more games would do this. So did you notice the transition there as it went from the FMV into the in-game, or trying to get a seamless transition? I think that outside of RPGs, I'm sure that I've seen, like, you know, Breath of the Wild doing things like that very well. Does The Witcher do it? I don't know, but it's just something that, like, not rather than keeping. I mean, it's something this video will probably come out in some way during the Fire Emblem Three Houses playthrough. Fire Emblem Three Houses, for all its other qualities, just never does this. You know, like the cinematics and the world exist in two totally different spaces, and joining things together is great. Let's carry on. Actually, one more thing on this, because already, I mean, we are I'd say 2 minutes in to the first thing, and we're seeing the first devices of Nobu Uematsu coming in. We'll do it the second half of this. Bombastic, you know, cinematic concluding. This is where the game starts. Opening bombing mission, I think, is the track. The tempo of that is, again, it's injecting urgency, and it's like, you know, it's an urgent piece of music with these crashes and falls, but it's also sort of like this unresolved element. And what Nobu, to me, is doing already at this point is trying to make us feel as Cloud should feel. And there's a constant sense of the music trying to manipulate you into this. Again, look at Fire Emblem, or you look at any of the other, you know, Baldur's Gate, or anything else that I've covered, Fallout on the channel. Like, this is trying to, the music is trying to make you be on a level with the character. A level up to start with is great, but that's not really what we're here to discuss. Although it does help to at least establish that mechanic immediately. We could talk about the level 5 and 6, but that's Okay. So, sorry. Oh, yes. So, how many lines of dialogue have we had there? Lines of dialogue which to me seem pretty natural. You know, it's not, you know, Ken Loach, but you know, it's this. It seems none of it seems heartily artificial, highly artificial. We've established two organisations very, very clearly. Ooh, gone back. Oh, sorry, let's go off that. Apologies. This is not skipping quite as I wanted to. Yeah, so graphical glitches from VLC. So we've got the organisations of Avalanche and Soldier, and we've established that Soldier is something significant, not something not every day, as Biggs says it. The capitalisation of Avalanche and Soldier, and indeed there's frequent use of capitalisation in this game, just to establish something that is organisational. I don't know if that comes from the Japanese, like maybe they did it, or you have to presume it's a localization issue, not issue, like solution. But it works really well as long as you don't overdo it, and they don't. So there's our thing. Here's we'll input the name now. Cloud is Cloud. You can call him what you like. And there we have, you know, at least a basic motivation and sort of personality angle. So, like, you know, we know something about Cloud now. It's not, as again, it doesn't have to be Dostoevsky to do this. You know, it doesn't need to be a life story. We just get a flavour for him having a personality. And that's going to be a theme with this. Again, what does this tell us about Barrett? Like, already established as the leader in a game with natural dialogue, impatient, and, you know, what's there's a word I'm looking for that I can't seem to find. Impetuous. And okay, so we've established a relation. We're only like about 6 lines in, and we've established a. Okay, I mean that's just necessary. No, this is one of the best parts of the entire game. What does that shot do and tell us? Apologies for the slightly out thing. I should customize this one. From here. So once again, we're binding together the video and the world. But that shot, as he runs under, the large, imposing mechanical construct of the Shinra Corporation, and like the small, you know, diminutive, like the long, high, like low-angled shot, it would be the easiest thing in the world to just flip between the images there. But that angle implies oppression. That is like this is the thing with Final Fantasy VII. That it has genuine like cinematography with that. That is a proper piece of cinematography. And it's told us something about the world without having to actually write down anything. Again, this is establishing mechanics. The other thing with this, you know, is that this opening mission for now, we've still been, right the way through this, we're on that same piece of music. That's the emotional tone to everything, and we're not going to split up the combat with it just yet. That battle music is not, you know, those of us who played this a lot know it's coming, but it's not there just yet. And then there's going to be another change in the music in a second, which I think is, again, just really, really deliberate. Just before we go, what does... Oh, sorry. Do it from here. Something... And I saw somebody actually criticising this the other day, and it's just like, I don't know what you're thinking. We haven't stayed at a fixed angle here. We've very deliberately changed, massively changed, the position of the camera. Like, why is the camera there? Well, firstly, it is, again, it's reinforcing that insignificance of these people compared to the mammoth organisational nature of what they're taking on. It's also showcasing, like, as well, and there's a little bit of, without, I'm really trying not to avoid any spoilers, just in case somebody's watching this for the first time. But it also implies quite a lot of height. You know, the shot being at that angle and at that zoom, if you were to zoom that in, like, I don't know, even like 50%, you don't get the sense of how far that walkway is up. You know, which will matter later, you know, in the story. Other games aren't like, wouldn't do this. Like when I watch, like all these shots so far, like they're just not something that you see in Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy. I mean, I didn't play 13, but even like 12, and really for a lot of 10, to say nothing of Three Houses or indeed anything. I mean, one could argue that, you know, games like Fallout 1 and 2, they're doing something different. Their camera angle is like, and their music is deliberately dispassionate. But there's nothing wrong with telling a story if you're going to do it well. And if you can do it in a frame, you know, like, if that frame is going to tell people what's going on, then do that. Okay. So, change of music, change of pace. No one's doing anything. Everyone's standing around for this. We're now going to talk about reactors. So the pace on that is, I'll probably just pause it because there's not much to say in here. We've zoomed in a bit more now, and it's going to get increasingly, like, sort of, it's going to dance around depending on the size of the location they're in, really. But the pace and weight of the music now, it's like deliberately mechanical, and you know, when I say inhumane, perhaps unhuman is what I mean to say with that. It is a machine-like piece of music. This bit isn't terribly complex, but like it's a very that is an incredibly simple piece of animation to explain that the elevator's moving, and it gives a sense of weight and movement to it. But again, we're now we'll come back some because I want to talk about the characters now. Right, these character models on the surface, they are, like they're pretty basic. I mean, even like when you look at Final Fantasy VIII or Final Fantasy IX, like these models look, pretty janky. But they are incredibly expressive. We've got emote 1, emote 2, emote 3, emote 4, emote 5. And then these head turns, which will crop up again. If it was cinema, you'd talk about blocking, I guess, with this. But Fire Emblem Three Houses tries to do this with its support things, and it has this, and I think that the lost art of the emote. I mean, these emotes, I guess, this was in a time before sort of Momorpagas were popular, or online things generally, and now like emoting seems to mean something else. But like the way these characters move, they don't have many emotes, but the ones that they have are incredibly expressive. I read somewhere with regards to like to drawing. I was just trying to teach myself a little bit of drawing for the art prototyping side, and somebody said that like when you're drawing people, particularly, the art is in the first 3 lines, and those 3 lines are the lines of movement. And I think it's a really, really good point. So this is 90% of the art or whatever. I forget exactly how they phrased it, but the point that, and the rest essentially to them being technique. If you use your character's movements, even if you've only got 10 movements of the character, even if you've got 5 movements, make that like Cloud's movement different to Barrett's. Again, this is a zoom out scale and scope shot. I also think it's just from a design perspective, it's rather gorgeous. We've introduced the battle music because there's more of a sense of, I don't know. I don't want to say, what do I want to say? How do I phrase this? Battles have become in here an event. Like the reactor itself is dispassionate, so we need something different to. I went in the menu here. This was purely a do we have more to? We don't. So hold on about a second. Skip forward for a bit because this is the game. By the way, another thing with this, like this is the opening, right? And now let's compare this to. It seems like most modern games, like, and it's the dying art of like actually have you being able to control your player for sustained periods is nice. But the amount of this that, like, we are the ones manipulating Cloud. Yeah, I mean, most of it we're just moving him around the map, but we're still moving it. we're still in control for the vast majority of this. I think even like something like Final Fantasy IX, like this was Square Enix were going off the boil with this, and I can sympathise with why people prefer Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, because you had even more control then. I could talk about the battle mechanics and why there's nothing wrong with having an easy opening dungeon, but conversation for a different time. Again, it's that low angle shot that we're coming down from this, showing the scale and the scope. That emote, by the way, is a free one. I forget that I can't equip it. So that, I think, is brilliant. We'll just pause and get to the point. I should have turned this. It should have turned the pause, or the fast forward and backward steps down a bit. But anyway. So what's that giving to us? It's just that to me is just like a hint of, I don't know, just meaningful mystery. We're just adding something, just a layer of complexity to this, both in terms of, why, what is this if not just a reactor? I mean, to be honest, what it is, like they could be looking at a toaster, and like if a voice in Cloud's head or somewhere, or a thought or whatever this is, says, this isn't just a toaster, like it's applying sort of weight to it and adding just something that's more complex without even, it's not complex, it's like basic, like, anime storytelling, but it's enough. There's another emote there, just again very expressive, and there and there. Like, from a programming point of view, I love it. So it's the Scorpion, the infamous Scorpion boss that I don't want to admit how many times 14-year-old me would somehow manage to die to this. What is interesting with this is the music has changed, but it hasn't changed to the absolutely brilliant standard battle music or the equally excellent what we generally call the boss battle music. I think the literal translation is still more fighting, or, well, if there's such a thing as a literal translation. But the second fighting piece, this has gone to one of my favourite pieces of music. It's gone back to the original bombing music. The opening bombing mission. So we're back in urgency mode. We don't need to watch the entire thing of this. And we certainly don't need to worry with any of that. The point is, the urgency has resumed, even in the reactor. So we're urgent again. And then, I love this. I love it so much. Let's have an actual timer. Now, 10 minutes to get out of the reactor. For me playing this for the first time, it's terrifying. You know, 10 minutes to get out. I have no idea how long it might take me. In reality, it's like I don't know anybody who didn't get out of the reactor like long before. I was so bad at this when I first played it. Like, I really didn't get it, and I think I might have ran it down to the last 2 minutes, like on my first like playthrough getting out. Does something else really cool, which I like. If you really want to make that worth something, let's play 58. So, you being in the menu, it's not paused. I mean, there is a separate pause, but the point is that if you want to change your gear, it's like, well, that's fine, but add it to the roster of things. Again, it's about instilling like some form of emotional reaction, and again, it's working with that music. Now, if you do want to know how you use up the time to get out of here, it is, of course, forgetting to get Jesse. Which, again, by the way, like this, and it'll do it again before the end, is just showcasing just something else with Cloud's personality. Okay, it's very sort of, but the thing is with Cloud's like personality here is it's not flying in the face of what most people would do. You know, most people, if you see somebody who's there and you're potentially in danger, you're going to help them. And I don't know how far we'll be in the Fire Emblem playthrough, but like Jesus Christ, Byleth, like. You know, I mean, you can do that in different way. I mean, like if we talk about, I'm not the biggest fan of Witcher 3, to be honest. Like, but at least with that, you know, when Geralt is helping people, he's helping people. When he's not helping people, because you're choosing to play it that way, which is, you know, go for it. That's totally in keeping. I think that's even truer to the books. It's part of a personality, you know, rather than it just being like at odds with what you're doing. Well, anyway, with bags of time to spare, we're going to come out. It's the height of the camera. Notice again the height of this on the way out. It's actually slightly closer, I think, than it was previously. And what we will do is we'll try and blend the active world with the cinematic. And we're not spending too much time in that. There's a few more shots I want to sort of talk about. I mean, I like this as a shot. I just think it's a good claustrophobic shot that, again, adds variation. But this is more the one I want to talk about. Again, there's a slight blending there between the scene as the door blows and then the scene that they're in. Notice here the angle of the shot has changed. There's been a pause in the music indicating a transition, but look at the angle of the shot. That we are now on a level with the characters. And to me, this is like just showcasing a total change of pace. That is a conversational angle, and it's also, you know, just sort of, there's no, I don't feel like there's anywhere near the level of oppressiveness in this. Again, really brief there. So, let go for a second. So this is our functional world, which is somewhat unkind and uncaring. By the way, you know, this is another thing, and maybe this isn't what I really want to talk about as much. No, maybe it does matter. Maybe this needs recognition. Your choices will matter. Your choices matter. This influences things behind the scenes. That this will influence later interactions with Ares and Tifa, potentially Barrett. Like, a lot of there are dialogue choices. Let's go back one, I think. Yeah. If you choose, you better get out of here, you don't just, firstly, you don't get the next piece of dialogue. Secondly, you don't get the option to buy the flower. You don't have the flower later. You're not, like, these choices in a subtle way matter, and they affect. There's relationship mechanics within this. You have I don't want to talk about it in too much detail. Like, it's not. You have subtle relationship mechanics with some of your other party members, and they're not. They're just so fucking at odds with, like, Dragon Age. He did, like, Dragon Age, and it's just like, you have got like 87 relationship points with Morrigan. It's like, so now she'll suck your cock. And it's like, it's not that. It's not something that you game. It's not, they're not putting numbers on it. It just feels like this is integrated with the people involved. And there's a vast amount of these dialogue choices in the game that subtly shape it. Not so much that, like, you're having to game the system, but it's more than just the what's the word I'm looking for? Catch-22 is kind of like too negative, but like these false choices, there is some level of impact to them. Even on some, like, one of the big criticisms of doing games like this, the JRPGs, compared to, like, the more Western school of, like, the Baldur's Gates and the Fallouts, is that they end up being very linear experiences, and they are very linear experiences in comparison. But you can still offer some variance within. It can and should. I wish I could say it must, but it should be more than a book. Let's just carry on with this. So what's the emotional tone here and here? The piece of music is the piece called Anxious Heart, is the translation I know. Sorrowful, uncomfortable, oppressive, but not necessarily, I'm just going to hold it just off for one more, not necessarily frightening, I guess. It's just the world of Final Fantasy VII is just, it's just not happy place. But again, how many times already has in the opening 20 minutes has Nobuo Uematsu been the person most responsible for setting the tone? It is really you could sit here and just listen to the music and it would be telling you a story. I chose to fight these as an example piece. Yeah. Okay, decision matters, but now decision doesn't matter, and now if I was going to be mean to Final Fantasy VII, I don't want to be mean to the most beloved game of all time, but I would say that a key is consistency in your graphics, and these character models do have a tendency to dance around in shape and scope a bit in some of these cutscenes. Oh, that, by the way, just just very literal symbolism for just running down a hole. It would do more than that just being a vertical track. I mean, obviously, we know from the world it's going to serve another purpose. But yeah. Barrett's emoting. The other three are already emoting, even though they are, much smaller characters. That body posture. For the record, Cloud's not actually in this bit, and the scene is sort of being defined by the music. So they haven't put music on here. Because right now we're not trying to set a mood for Cloud, who is very much, and he's an interesting protagonist, but he's a very good protagonist. What does that tell us about Wedge? What does that tell us about Biggs? What does that tell us about Jesse? 3 lines. But their personality and their relationship with Cloud already in this early stage has been established. One of deference, of enthusiasm, and of care. That was as far as I wanted to go. I could literally do this to the final bloody battle of going through it. But also this, by the way, is just as a piece of cinematography for the way that they handle the train. I think that's really, really good. Of just handling it face on. Again, it's like try and think what this would be like. I'm just going to skip back through various scenes. What does this look like if this oh sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, this are all at the same camera angle. It doesn't. Your camera is a incredibly potent storytelling device, and I think that I'm not saying that you can't have a first person or third person game and have story and meaning. But if you think that, like, I don't know, like to pick like sort of popular and critically lauded films that people might like. If you think A New Hope, the first Star Wars film, or like Citizen Kane, or Jaws, Jurassic Park, whatever you want to pick of something that's got that recognition, would Star Wars have been better if everything was viewed from behind Luke Skywalker's head? Or behind, in the scenes where he's not there, Princess Leia's head, or whoever. You wouldn't think that. You've got a device here. Now, obviously, if you're making a game like, if you want to, some people think, the first person thing's inherently more immersive. Because I don't see myself from a third person perspective. I look out of my eyes, as is tradition, and that's okay. But it shouldn't. There's a reason that we don't do all films that way. There's a reason that we don't do all books that way. There's a reason that, like, when you're telling stories, we tell them within the best stories are generally told within the context, rather than simply from the immediate vantage point of the protagonist. And the other thing I would say with things like this is, like, if you're making Doom, then, like, Doom is like both the old Doom and the more sort of the modern versions. Like, there's nothing wrong with Doom. Like, I wouldn't want Doom to suddenly be, having the camera angle flash up and out and be, doing all these sort of like artistic stuff. But the amount of role-playing games where it's just like, you're not doing that. You're trying to tell a narrative about characters and places. Like, use it. So I think like the kind of themes that I was sort of going for with this, just to try and, like, to go back to them at the start, like, the first sign for me of a problematic, a fan-made game or a fan mod or something that, like, the first point where it goes wrong with dialogue and writing generally, is people just, they go on too long. Like, the curse of it, I must admit, I've done it myself in some of the writing that I've done over the years. But, like, long, unbroken, highly descriptive streams of consciousness coming out of people's mouths, which is ironically more of a Japanese thing to do. Just the general, Japanese is baseball, like English is soccer, sort of idiom. It seldom looks good. Like, how, like, a conversation in these games and writing and that, it's like, I don't know that you need to be necessarily entirely Chekhov's gun about it, but there is definitely a case of, like, the engineering side of it has reached perfection when there's nothing else left to take away. pacing is fucking important. It is in any temporal art. It is probably the most important thing, more than your world, more than your characters, more than any of your other devices. Keeping good pacing. And I think that, to me, Final Fantasy VII manages it. I do, as I say, have a soft spot for Final Fantasy VI. I can see, people who prefer that. It's like, well, there's quality to it. I'd put it another way. What's the Shakespeare expression of brevity is the soul of wit? Just don't waste people's time. I guess is the thing with that. Like, make things meaningful, and you can do that and keep things realistic when you're doing so. So that's kind of the dialogue down. The other thing to say is, like, if you're gonna tell a story with which, any story where you want to follow a character who feels things and have a player who is feeling things other than just sort of, fun or boredom or excitement. If you want to have complex emotions in your game, then, screenplay helps, although that more comes into the, brevity is the soul of wit side of things. You can do storytelling without writing anything. Show, don't tell. This opening 20 minutes is like the king of show, don't tell. But the other key part is, like, the music, and really, it's not just. So my two biggest hates in video games, like, if you really want to wind me up, then firstly, you talk about graphics rather than art design. Talk about, like, textures and, like, resolutions rather than what things look like. Like, detail is fucking just, like, strangling art design. You don't need detail. You need the artistic part. You need what does the shot say? What does the world say? Like, what are you saying with this? I don't care how detailed the fucking brickwork is. But the other thing is when we talk about, like, what games have the best soundtrack, and I've known people say, like, oh, best soundtrack, Tony Hawk's Skater, and it's like, no, it's not a game soundtrack. That is just having CDs on while you play a video game. The same with the fucking, like, like Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. Like, yeah, I like Alice in Chains too, great band, but you're not curating a mood. You're just slapping things down, like, and hoping that procedurally it makes sense and gives a vague sense of context. What I'm trying to say here, like, with music, is that, like, you could have a really, really good musician making the music for this, but if they don't understand what they are doing and why are we asking you to make music for this scene, and speaking with the the lead designer, the lead developer, that, like, everybody high up, to say, like, and with obviously whoever's in charge of sound in general, to say, like, well, why are we doing this? Integrate the music. Like, it's just, that was something in Final Fantasy 15 that just there was just no integration between the music and the storytelling. Like, why? That's fucking basic shit. and it's kind of like, I know I'm getting a bit moany now with this channel, having like, you know, started with praise, but like I feel like there's things we're looking at here that are lost arts. And I don't think that the people who are responsible for the remakes understand any of these things. Which makes me even sadder that, you know, because with the resources we have right now, like we could have absolutely smashed Final Fantasy VII out of the park. You know, just like a little less time spent on textures and resolution, a little bit more time spent on the actual art design. No. So yeah. Well, I guess yeah. I guess on this, the other thing I like. Well, I've already said that. I could have kept going on with this till the end. There's some really nice pieces of music with this. Have if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, the original, I would like you to go away and play it. And I would really, really like you, not just if you don't mind low textures, go and play it on low textures. If you hate low textures, if low textures are the bane of your life, if looking at this screen now is like, has you like being, you know, sick into your mouth, breaking out in hives, you, my friend, need to play it on low textures more than anyone. You need to, because for you yourself, you're missing out, and for the wider world, you might be part of the problem. I know that's like really damning, but like this was, in terms of like the throughput of quality games, it was a better time than now. And like I can, you know, can talk about that in terms of you know, obviously me being younger and at a more receptive age. But the amount of like quality games that we were getting output a month, you know, and you look at it, it's like, oh, what games are being made this that we're looking forward to this year? It's just like there's so much of it, aside from all like the pre-order horror and loot boxes and just the general corporate enshittification of everything. Like this was, yeah. So yeah, if you haven't played the original, go away and play the original. For the love of God, play the original before you play the remake, if possible. Because the remake will, if you play that first, there won't be any going back. Like it will be, yeah, tainted for you. If you have played the original and you've played the remake, as when I say remake, I'm including the second one, which is Rebirth, whatever. If you played both and you really liked remake/Rebirth, I want you to go back through and think about, especially in similar time frames, if you can, if you like, compare the opening 20 minutes of this, the opening 20 minutes of that. Compare which of these storytelling devices are still intact. And I know I might be telling you to go and like look at something you previously enjoyed with a more critical eye, which is a bit curmudgeon-y. I know, but you know, and then, you know, if you think you can go, if you can come back from that and say, no, Kachama, you're wrong. It's got the same ways of telling the story. It's doing that. The dialogue is still short and punchy. The music is still. I mean, I seriously hope that the music doesn't differentiate too much from the original. Although I could talk about the fact that like one of the pieces from that I heard was like just completely dissonant with the general style of the music in VII. I've heard some of the upscaled stuff. I mean, what's to talk about? It's upscaled music. Is it better for that? I'm not sure, but maybe. But like the newer pieces, like just sound like they're written by somebody in a different country. Yeah. So I hope this has been an interesting video. Will I do a Final Fantasy VII playthrough on stream? No, I'm not planning on it. I might do Final Fantasy IX because I think Final Fantasy IX's got less of a story, and yeah. But I really, I hope that. Oh, I'd love if somebody who hasn't played the original would like go back and play this. Just be great. And if you're watching this, and you are already a successful game designer, then I mean, I don't know why I'd expect a ridiculously arrogant statement, but like I suppose hypothetically, um, please remember like these things because it like you like they're not like I mean and as well from a coding perspective like it's just so high value for low effort, all these things like if you take the lessons from this video, you can make I mean, you have the potential to make something really brilliant that would, if this matters to you, like, and I suppose it would have to if you're a professional, that would sell like hotcakes. You know. Anyway, sorry, I managed to depress myself with this. Thanks for watching. This might be part of I might put it in a secondary playlist because there are other videos of playthroughs that I want to do a similar thing with. But yeah, I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bye bye.